I'm Eleanor Wilson, 67 years old, standing alone at the airport gate, watching my daughter Tiffany and my grandchildren board without a backward glance. After decades of supporting them through everything, the sting of betrayal burns deep. The look on the gate agent's face says it all. Pity. Not today. I pull out my phone and call my pilot, while their commercial flight takes off for Hawaii. I'm heading to my lawyer's office. The inheritance plans they've taken for granted are about to change drastically. Before I tell you how I went from abandoned at a gate to reclaiming my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and join me on this journey of self-respect that started with one painful moment. I wasn't always wealthy. When my husband Richard died of a heart attack at 42, I was left with our 8-year-old daughter Tiffany and a small insurance payout. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Portland, and I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. During those exhausting years, I noticed how women struggled to find affordable skincare products that actually worked. That observation became my business idea. Starting with homemade formulations in my kitchen, I created my first skincare line for working women. I packaged them in simple containers and sold them at local markets on weekends. Women loved them. Within 3 years, Eleanor's Essentials had expanded to a small storefront. By the time Tiffany was 16, we had 3 locations across Oregon, and I had secured a small business loan to build our first manufacturing facility. While I worked endless hours, Tiffany grew increasingly distant and entitled. She attended an expensive private high school at her insistence. I wanted her to have what I didn't, but she complained constantly about not having the latest designer clothes like her friends. When she was accepted to NYU, I paid her full tuition, housing, and expenses. My business was thriving by then, but I still lived modestly, reinvesting profits and saving aggressively. Tiffany met Bradley during her junior year. He came from money but had none of his own. His family had cut him off after his 3rd failed attempt at college. I had reservations from the start. He had a smooth way of talking about grand business plans that never materialized, and he looked at my daughter like she was his meal ticket. When they announced their engagement after graduation, I voiced my concerns once, gently. Tiffany didn't speak to me for 2 months afterward. I paid for their dream wedding $75,000 that Bradley's family should have contributed half of, according to tradition. Their gift was a set of crystal champagne flutes. For their first home, I provided the down payment as a loan that we both knew would never be repaid. When the grandchildren came, Zoe and then Mason, I covered the medical bills not included in the bare minimum insurance Bradley's part-time job provided. Through all this, my business expanded nationally. Eleanor's Essentials became Elglow Cosmetics, with products in major department stores. I sold a controlling interest to a conglomerate 5 years ago, but remained on the board with significant stock options. My net worth had grown to 8 figures, though I kept this closely guarded. My financial advisor Patricia and my attorney Samuel were among the few who knew the full picture. Richard had taught me valuable lessons about money before he passed. Never show all your cards, he'd say, and never give without expectations clear. I failed to follow the second piece of advice with Tiffany. Each time I gave, I hoped it would fill whatever emptiness drove her perpetual dissatisfaction. It never did. Last Christmas, Tiffany announced they needed a family vacation to reconnect. Hawaii was her choice, specifically the 4 Seasons on Maui. When I suggested a more affordable option, she rolled her eyes. "Mom, we need this. You never know how much time we have left together." The emotional manipulation worked as it always did. I agreed to fund the trip, secretly hoping it might actually bring us closer. The planning fell entirely to me. I booked the flights, reserved 3 ocean view rooms, researched activities the grandchildren might enjoy. Tiffany sent texts with demands: specific restaurants, helicopter tours, premium rental cars. Bradley contributed nothing except complaints when I suggested they might cover their own incidental expenses. 2 weeks before departure, Tiffany called with an odd request. "Mom, we should meet at the gate. Bradley has an early meeting, so we'll come straight from there." Something in her voice sounded off, but I brushed away my concerns. I always did. As the trip approached, I felt genuinely excited. Maybe this time together would bridge the growing distance. Maybe my grandchildren would put down their phones long enough to have a real conversation with me. Maybe Bradley would show some appreciation. I bought special gifts for each of them. A pearl necklace for Zoe, who was entering her quinceañera year, and a high-end telescope for Mason, who had recently developed an interest in astronomy. I even found vintage cufflinks for Bradley that matched ones Richard had worn. How foolish I was. How willfully blind to the patterns established over decades. The airport incident wouldn't be the first betrayal, but it would be the last I would simply accept. The morning of our trip dawned bright and clear. I had my bags packed a day early, a habit from my hardworking years when preparation meant survival. I took extra care with my appearance, choosing a comfortable but stylish traveling outfit and arranging my silver hair in a sleek bob. The car service arrived promptly at 7 a.m. for our 10:30 flight. "Airport, Mrs. Wilson?" the driver asked, loading my 2 sensible suitcases. "Yes, please. And call me Eleanor," I replied, settling into the back seat with my perfectly wrapped gifts beside me. Traffic was light and we arrived by 8 a.m. I checked in my luggage, keeping only a small carry-on and the gift bag. The ticket agent smiled warmly. "Heading to Hawaii? Lucky you." "Family vacation," I explained, feeling a flutter of anticipation. With boarding passes in hand, I navigated security and found a coffee shop near our gate. I ordered a latte and texted Tiffany. "I'm at gate C23. See you soon." Her response came quickly. "Running a bit late." "Don't worry." By 9:45 a.m., the gate area was filling with vacationers in tropical shirts and sun hats. I kept glancing toward the terminal entrance, checking my watch with increasing frequency. At 10:05 I spotted them. Tiffany in designer sunglasses, Bradley looking irritated as usual, and my grandchildren trailing behind, faces illuminated by their phone screens. Something about their body language seemed off. They were huddled together, speaking in low voices. When Tiffany spotted me, she straightened abruptly and plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, you're early as always," she said, air-kissing near my cheek. "I was worried you might miss the flight," I replied, embracing her stiffly. She pulled away quickly. "Grandma," Zoe muttered without looking up from her phone. Mason at least managed eye contact and an awkward half-hug. Bradley nodded curtly. "Eleanor." I noticed they had minimal luggage. Just small carry-ons despite the 10-day trip we'd planned. When I commented on this, Tiffany laughed nervously. "We're going minimalist this trip. Island style, you know?" The gate agent announced pre-boarding for families with young children and passengers needing assistance. "That's us," Bradley said quickly, grabbing their boarding passes from Tiffany. "But Mason and Zoe aren't small children anymore," I pointed out, confused. "And our seats aren't together anyway. We should board with our assigned groups." An uncomfortable silence fell. Tiffany and Bradley exchanged glances. The children suddenly found their shoes fascinating. "Mom," Tiffany said, her voice taking on the condescending tone she used when explaining something to a child. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. "About what?" "We've decided we need a real family vacation. Just us." She gestured to Bradley and the kids. Without interruptions.
Ister daher, uncomprehending.
"What are you saying?" Bradley stepped forward. "Look, Eleanor, the kids need quality time with just their parents. You understand, right? The old lady cramping their style isn't exactly a vacation." "Bradley," Tiffany hissed, though whether she was objecting to his words or his bluntness wasn't clear. "What?" "I'm just saying what we all agreed on," he retorted. I looked at my grandchildren, hoping for some sign of disagreement or discomfort with this ambush. Zoe was typing furiously on her phone, a smirk playing at her lips. Mason at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though he remained silent. "You're uninviting me? At the airport? After I paid for everything?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "We'll pay you back," Tiffany said dismissively, though we both knew they wouldn't and couldn't. "First boarding call for flight 1422 to Maui," announced the gate agent. "That's us," Bradley said, gathering their things. "Coming, babe." Tiffany hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "I'll call you when we land, Mom. Enjoy the break. You're always saying how busy you are." They moved toward the gate, boarding passes extended. I stood frozen, the gift bag dangling from my fingers. At the last moment, Tiffany turned back. "Could you cancel your hotel reservation? We might use the room for the kids to have their own space." Then they were gone, disappearing down the jetway without a backward glance. The gate agent gave me a sympathetic look that burned worse than the betrayal itself. I stood there as the remaining passengers boarded, clutching gifts no one wanted and tickets that suddenly led nowhere. An older gentleman touched my arm gently. "Miss, are you boarding this flight?" I straightened my shoulders and found my voice.
No.
"No, I'm not." As I walked away from the gate, something shifted inside me. The hurt remained, but beneath it, something harder formed. A diamond of resolve created under decades of pressure. Walking away from that gate was perhaps the most difficult and liberating moment of my life since burying Richard. Each step felt heavy yet purposeful. I found a quiet corner in the terminal and sat down, the rejected gifts still in my lap. This wasn't the first time Tiffany had demonstrated her selfishness, merely the most blatant. I remembered her wedding day, how she'd complained about the flowers being the wrong shade of pink, after I'd spent thousands on her exact specifications. The Christmas she'd opened my gift, a first edition of her childhood favorite book, and set it aside without comment before gushing over Bradley's gift card. The countless dinners where my business accomplishments were dismissed while Bradley's latest big opportunity received enthusiastic attention. I'd always made excuses for her. She missed her father. She was insecure. She was under pressure as a mother. I had enabled this behavior for decades, believing that material support equated to love. In doing so, I'd raised a daughter who viewed me as nothing more than an ATM with inconvenient emotions attached. The realization settled over me like a weight, then lifted as determination took its place. I pulled out my phone and called a number I rarely used. "Frank, it's Eleanor Wilson. Is the jet available today?" Frank Peterson had been my private pilot for 5 years, a luxury I'd allowed myself after selling majority shares in my company. I rarely used the Gulfstream G550, preferring commercial flights for their environmental efficiency. Today was an exception. "Mrs. Wilson. Yes, the aircraft is ready. When and where would you like to go? How soon can you be at Portland International? I need to get to San Francisco this afternoon. We can be ready for takeoff in 90 minutes, ma'am." "Perfect. I'll be at the private terminal shortly." My next call was to Samuel Goldstein, my attorney of 20 years. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise," his warm voice answered. "Samuel, I need to see you today. It's about my will and trusts." A brief pause. "I see. Is everything all right?" "No, but it will be. I'm flying down. Can you make time this afternoon?" "For you? Always. I'll clear my schedule after 3 p.m. I thanked him and ended the call, then requested an Uber to the private aviation terminal. As I waited, I composed a brief text to Tiffany. "Have a wonderful family vacation. We'll talk when you return." I turned off my phone after that, unwilling to deal with whatever self-justifying response might come. The Uber driver was chatty, expressing impressed surprise when I directed him to the private terminal. "Special occasion?" he asked. "You could say that," I replied. "I'm taking back my life." Frank met me at the entrance, professionally attired and genuinely pleased to see me. "Mrs. Wilson, welcome. We'll be ready for departure in about 40 minutes. "Thank you, Frank. And please, after 5 years, I think you can call me Eleanor." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I mean Eleanor." The terminal lounge was elegant and discreet. I sat there reflecting on how differently I was treated by my employees compared to my family. Frank respected me. My executive assistant Judith valued me. The board members listened to my input. Yet my own daughter saw me as disposable. When it was time to board, flight attendant Margot greeted me warmly. "It's lovely to see you again, Mrs. Wilson. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" "Just water for now, thank you." The interior of the jet was luxurious without being ostentatious. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, and ample space. A far cry from the middle seat in economy I'd booked for the Hawaii trip to save money that would ultimately be wasted elsewhere. Tiffany and Bradley had no idea this jet existed. I'd kept many aspects of my wealth private, partly from a lingering working-class mentality, and partly from concern that knowledge of my true net worth would only exacerbate their entitlement. What a mistake that had been. By hiding my success, I'd allowed them to underestimate and undervalue me. As we reached cruising altitude, I gazed out the window at the clouds below. They looked solid enough to walk on an illusion, just like the family relationship I'd believed in. I accepted a glass of Chardonnay from Margot and spent the flight making notes about what I wanted to discuss with Samuel. By the time we landed in San Francisco, I had clarity. The betrayal at the airport had merely been the final confirmation of what I'd known but refused to acknowledge for years. It was time to stop enabling behavior that harmed both me and, ultimately, them. A car was waiting to take me directly to Samuel's office in the financial district. As the city's familiar skyline came into view, I felt a strange lightness. The decision made, the path forward clear. I was ready to correct the mistakes of the past. Samuel Goldstein's law office occupied the top floor of a sleek high-rise with sweeping views of San Francisco Bay. The reception area featured subtle displays of success, awards and recognitions discreetly placed, original artwork by local artists, furnishings that whispered rather than shouted luxury. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Wilson, welcome. Mr. Goldstein is expecting you. Can I offer you anything while you wait?" "No, thank you, Diane. How's your son doing at Berkeley?" Her face brightened. "Thriving. Thank you for asking. And for the scholarship foundation that's helping make it possible." I smiled genuinely for the first time that day. This was the kind of interaction that mattered, acknowledging people as individuals with lives and dreams beyond their utility to me. Samuel emerged from his office moments later, his tall frame slightly stooped with age but his eyes sharp as ever behind wire-rimmed glasses. At 72, he had the option to retire but continued practicing for select clients. "Eleanor," he said warmly, embracing me briefly. "Come in, please." His corner office was understated elegance. Bookshelves filled with legal tomes, a substantial desk, and comfortable seating arranged for conversation rather than intimidation. "You look troubled," he observed once we were seated. "Tell me what's happened." I recounted the airport incident in detail, keeping my voice steady despite the fresh pain. Samuel listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "I see," he said when I finished. "And this is what prompted your desire to revisit your estate planning?" "Yes." It opened my eyes to a pattern I've been ignoring for years. I leaned forward. "Samuel, you've advised me on business matters for 2 decades. You've seen my company grow from a regional brand to a national success. But you've also witnessed my personal failures." "Eleanor." "No, let's be honest. You warned me years ago about how I was handling things with Tiffany. What did you call it?" He sighed. "Creating a monster of entitlement." "Exactly. And I dismissed your concerns. Well, the monster is fully grown now, and I'm done feeding it." Samuel nodded slowly. "What changes do you want to make?" "I want to review everything: my will, trusts, property holdings, business interests. Currently, everything goes to Tiffany and the grandchildren, with Tiffany as trustee." "That's correct. Your estate is currently valued at approximately $17 million, with the majority going to Tiffany outright in trusts established for Zoe and Mason that Tiffany controls until they reach 30. That needs to change. Immediately." Samuel studied me. "These decisions shouldn't be made in anger, Eleanor. Perhaps after you've had time to." "This isn't anger," I interrupted. "It's clarity. I've spent decades making decisions out of guilt and misplaced hope. Today I'm making them with clear eyes." He regarded me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. What are you thinking?" "First, I want Patricia to join us. We need to discuss financial and charitable options." Samuel picked up his phone. "Diane, please ask Patricia James to join us if she's available." He turned back to me. "While we wait, let's discuss specific concerns about the current arrangement." We spent the next 15 minutes reviewing my existing will and trusts. The documents reflected years of generous intentions and blind spots. Tiffany had been given almost complete control with minimal oversight. Patricia arrived, bringing her characteristic energy into the room. In her mid-50s with a pragmatic approach to wealth management, she had been handling my finances for nearly a decade. "Eleanor," Samuel said, "it's urgent. How can I help? After briefly explaining the situation, I outlined my new vision. I want to completely restructure my estate plan. First, education trust for Zoe and Mason that can only be used for tuition and related expenses. Second, a series of milestone-based distributions that require them to demonstrate responsibility, employment, community service, further education. Nothing handed over without being earned. Patricia nodded approvingly. And for Tiffany and Bradley? A modest trust that provides supplemental income, not enough to live on without working. Again with conditions attached. And the bulk of your estate? Samuel asked. I took a deep breath. I want to establish a foundation focused on women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. I was fortunate enough to succeed despite the obstacles. I want to make that path easier for others. Samuel and Patricia exchanged glances. It's a worthy goal, Samuel said, though I must advise you that such a significant change will likely cause serious family conflict.
I'm aware.
My voice was steady. But continuing as I have been is doing none of us any favors. My money has become a crutch that's preventing Tiffany and Bradley from standing on their own. Patricia leaned forward. I've actually been hoping you'd consider something like this. Your financial resources could create meaningful opportunities for women who remind me of you 25 years ago. Determined, innovative, but lacking capital and connections. For the next 2 hours we outlined the new structure. The foundation would receive 60% of my estate. Zoe and Mason's education trusts would each receive 10%. Another 10% would be divided among smaller charitable interests. The remaining 10% would fund the family trust with its strict conditions. As Samuel drafted the preliminary changes, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for the relationship I had hoped for, determination to correct my mistakes, and a surprising sense of liberation. There's one more thing, I said as our meeting concluded. I want to establish a family meeting to explain these changes once Tiffany and the family return from Hawaii. I want it held here in your office. Samuel raised an eyebrow. That's an unusual request. I want them to understand this isn't a hasty decision or an emotional reaction they can manipulate me out of. I want the professional environment and your presence to underscore the seriousness of the situation. He nodded slowly. As you wish. We'll need about 2 weeks to finalize all documents. Will that timing work? Perfectly. Their trip is 10 days. As I prepared to leave, Patricia touched my arm. Eleanor, I've known you for years. You've always put everyone else first. It's time you considered your own happiness too. Her words struck deeper than expected. When had I last made a decision based solely on what I wanted rather than what I thought others needed? Thank you, Patricia. I think that process is finally beginning. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. I checked my phone for the first time since leaving Portland. 7 missed calls from Tiffany, along with multiple texts ranging from confused to accusatory. I put the phone away without responding. They were probably just landing in Hawaii, ready to enjoy the vacation I had paid for without a second thought for how they had treated me. Let them wonder for a while. I had a private jet waiting and for the first time in decades, I intended to use my resources for my own well-being rather than to pacify those who took me for granted. The car dropped me at a hotel near the airport. Though I could have flown home immediately, I decided to stay overnight. The emotional toll of the day had left me exhausted, and the prospect of returning to my empty house felt unnecessarily punishing. In my suite, I ordered room service and finally checked Tiffany's messages. They followed a predictable pattern. Mom, did you get another flight? Are you mad? Don't be dramatic. We just thought you'd enjoy some time to yourself. Mom, seriously, answer your phone. Fine, be that way. We're trying to have a family vacation. The last one had come after they'd landed in Hawaii. There was a photo attached, Bradley, Tiffany, and the kids smiling broadly on the resort's entrance steps with the caption, "Quality family time begins. #blessed #Ohana. The casual cruelty took my breath away. Not only had they abandoned me, but they were also publicly celebrating it as though it had been the plan all along. I put the phone down without responding and slept better than I had in years. The next morning I called Frank and arranged for the jet to take me back to Portland. During the flight, I made another decision. I would use the unexpected free time to reconnect with parts of myself I had neglected while catering to Tiffany's demands. My home felt different when I returned. Not empty but full of possibilities. I spent the first day reorganizing my study, uncovering old sketchbooks from when I used to design my own packaging. I found notes for business books I'd considered writing but never prioritized because Tiffany always needed something. By the third day of their vacation, Tiffany's messages had turned concerned. "Mom, are you okay? Please answer. I'm getting worried. At least let me know you're safe. Mom, this isn't funny anymore." I finally replied with a brief text. "I'm fine. Enjoying some personal time. Have a wonderful vacation." Her response was immediate. "Where are you? What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I called Judith, my executive assistant, and asked her to arrange several things I'd been postponing. A full day at my favorite spa, lunch with my former business partners, and a meeting with the director of a women's shelter I'd supported financially for years but never visited in person. The days passed quickly. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, spent afternoons reading books that had gathered dust on my shelves, and even took a watercolor class I'd been interested in for years. Each evening, I checked social media to find more photos from Hawaii, each one designed to showcase their perfect family vacation. Midway through their trip, the tone of Tiffany's messages changed again. "Mom, I hope you're not doing anything rash because you're upset. We're having an amazing time but we miss you. The kids keep asking about you." A lie, the social media photos showed them thoroughly enjoying themselves without a thought for their grandmother. I maintained minimal contact, responding only enough to assure her I was physically well. This clearly unsettled her more than anger would have. She was accustomed to my emotional responses that she could manipulate. My calm distance offered no such opportunity. The day before their scheduled return, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Bradley. "Eleanor, what the hell is going on?" His voice had the familiar edge of entitlement. "Tiffany's been a mess because you're giving her the silent treatment." "I'm not giving anyone the silent treatment, Bradley. I'm living my life, just as you are all living yours. Look, if this is about the Hawaii thing, it's about much more than that. But we can discuss everything when you return. I've arranged a family meeting." "A family meeting?" He sounded surprised, then suspicious. "What for?" "To discuss the future. I'll text you the details. Goodbye, Bradley." I ended the call and blocked his number. The next day, as their return flight landed, I was having tea with Diane from Samuel's office, discussing her son's educational plans. When I returned home, I found Tiffany's car in my driveway and her sitting on my doorstep, still in her travel clothes. "Mom!" She jumped up when she saw me. "Where have you been?" "I've been waiting for hours. I had a lunch appointment," I replied calmly, unlocking the door. "You should have called first." She followed me inside, her expression a mixture of confusion and indignation. "Called first? I'm your daughter. Since when do I need an appointment?" I set down my purse and turned to face her. "Since I decided my time has value too, Tiffany. How was Hawaii? How was—" "Mom, what is going on with you? First you disappear, then you barely respond to my messages. Now you're acting like nothing happened." "Something definitely happened," I said, maintaining my composure. "You and Bradley decided to take a family vacation without me, after I paid for everything, and you informed me of this decision at the airport gate. That happened. We thought you'd understand. You're always saying you need more time to yourself. Please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was for my benefit." Her face flushed. "Fine. The kids wanted a vacation with just us for once, without you taking over everything and making it all about you." This was so contrary to reality that I almost laughed. "Is that what you tell yourself? That I make things all about me, when I fund your lifestyle and ask for nothing in return?" The front door opened before she could respond. Bradley strode in without knocking, followed by Zoe and Mason. "There you are," Bradley said accusingly. "We've been trying to reach you for days." I noted he didn't bother with a greeting or even acknowledgement of their behavior. "As you can see, I'm perfectly fine," I replied. "Just busy with my own life." "What's this about a family meeting?" he demanded. Exactly that. I've scheduled time with my attorney to discuss some changes I'm making. I'd like you all to be there. Changes? What changes? Tiffany's voice rose with alarm. We'll discuss everything thoroughly at the meeting. It's scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Your attorney? Bradley scoffed. Is this some kind of power play because you're mad about Hawaii? Are you punishing us? No, Bradley. For the first time in decades, I'm not enabling you. There's a difference. Tiffany's eyes filled with tears, her standard response when manipulation was needed. Mom, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. Perhaps you never really knew me, I said quietly. Or perhaps I'm finally becoming who I should have been all along. This is ridiculous, Bradley interjected. Just tell us what this is about. Tuesday, 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. I walked to the front door and held it open. I'm tired from my day. We can talk more then. You're kicking us out? Tiffany gasped. I'm asking for space. Something you all seemed to value greatly last week. They left reluctantly, Tiffany glancing back with tearful confusion, Bradley muttering about bizarre behavior, Zoe rolling her eyes dramatically, and Mason interestingly, looking at me with something that might have been respect. When the door closed behind them, I leaned against it and took a deep breath. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary. For the first time in my relationship with my daughter, I had set a boundary and held it. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next week would be challenging, but there was no turning back now. Nor did I want to. The week passed with multiple attempts from Tiffany to extract information about the meeting. She cycled through her usual tactics. Tearful phone calls, angry texts, sudden visits bearing gifts, and finally, wounded silence. None of it swayed me. When Tuesday arrived, I dressed with particular care in a navy suit that projected confidence and authority. Samuel had called the previous day to confirm all documents were prepared, and we had discussed the approach for the meeting. Remember, he'd advised, stay focused on the future, not on punishing the past. This is about creating a healthier dynamic for everyone. I arrived at his office 30 minutes early to review everything one final time. The conference room was prepared with water, coffee, and a formal arrangement of documents at each place. At precisely 1:58 p.m., Diane ushered in my family. Tiffany looked nervous in an outfit clearly chosen to remind me of her status as a busy mom. Casual but expensive. Bradley wore a sport coat over jeans, his version of making an effort. Zoe, 15 and perpetually unimpressed, sported deliberately ripped jeans and an oversized sweater. 12-year-old Mason, surprisingly, wore a button-down shirt and khakis. Their collective gasp when they entered Samuel's impressive office was noticeable. I realized they had severely underestimated my financial situation based on my modest lifestyle. Mom, what is this place? Tiffany whispered, looking around at the original artwork in panoramic views. This is my attorney's office. Please take a seat. Samuel will join us momentarily. They sat uncomfortably, Bradley's eyes narrowing as he took in the surroundings. How long have you been coming here? He asked suspiciously. Samuel has represented me for 20 years, I replied simply. Before more questions could follow, Samuel entered with Patricia. I made introductions. This is Samuel Goldstein, my attorney, and Patricia James, my financial advisor. They'll be helping us navigate today's discussion. Financial advisor? Tiffany repeated. Mom, what exactly is going on? Samuel took control of the meeting with practiced ease. Thank you all for coming. Mrs. Wilson has asked us to facilitate a discussion about some changes to her estate planning and financial arrangements that will affect all of you. Estate planning? Bradley interrupted. Eleanor, is something wrong with your health? I'm in excellent health, thank you, I replied. This isn't about my mortality. It's about my priorities. Samuel continued. Mrs. Wilson has been extremely generous with her resources over the years. However, she has decided to implement a more structured approach to family support moving forward. He distributed folders containing summaries of the new arrangements. As Tiffany and Bradley began reading, their expressions transformed from confusion to shock to outrage. Mom! Tiffany exclaimed. This says you're leaving most of your money to a foundation? and putting what's left in trusts with conditions. That's correct, I confirmed calmly. Bradley was scanning the documents rapidly. This is insane. You're cutting your own family off for some strangers. I'm not cutting anyone off, I clarified. I'm establishing parameters that encourage independence and personal growth. Samuel outlined the changes in detail. 60% of my estate would go to the newly established Eleanor Wilson Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. Education trusts for Zoe and Mason would receive 10% each, accessible only for actual educational expenses, and contingent on maintaining certain academic standards. The remaining 20% would fund a family trust providing supplemental income, not sufficient to live on without working, with distributions tied to employment, community service, and continuing education requirements. This is punishment, Tiffany said, tears streaming down her face. You're punishing us for Hawaii.
No, replied firmly.
I'm correcting a mistake I've made for decades. I've enabled dependence instead of encouraging independence. That stops now. Bradley's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. We'll contest it. Samuel interjected smoothly. Mr. Harris, Mrs. Wilson is of sound mind and body. These documents are legally binding and contain contest provisions that would result in complete disinheritance if challenged. I strongly advise against that course of action. This is about control, Bradley accused. You're trying to control us from beyond the grave. Actually, Patricia spoke up. This is about creating opportunity. The conditions in these trusts aren't punitive. They're designed to encourage growth. Employment doesn't mean menial jobs. It means meaningful work in any field. Community service can be in areas you're passionate about. Continuing education can be in subjects that interest you. The goal is engagement with life, not punishment. Zoe, who had been silently fuming, suddenly spoke. So you're like cutting us off because we wanted one vacation without you hovering? Her words stung, but I maintained my composure. No, Zoe. I'm restructuring my estate because I believe in all of you too much to continue undermining your potential with handouts. That's such bull, she began, but Mason interrupted her. Is my education trust really mine? He asked quietly. Like if I want to study astronomy, that would count? Absolutely, I confirmed, feeling a spark of hope at his engagement. Any legitimate educational pursuit is covered. Cool, he murmured, returning to studying the documents. Tiffany stood abruptly. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything I've been through. After losing Dad so young. You know how that affected me. I do know, I acknowledged. I lost him too. And perhaps in trying to compensate for his absence, I've done you a disservice. A disservice? She scoffed. You're betraying your own family for strangers. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm offering you an opportunity to build something meaningful on your own terms, with a safety net, but without dependence. Bradley slammed his folder shut. This is garbage. Come on, Tiffany. We don't have to sit here and be lectured by your mother about independence, while she pulls the financial rug out from under us. He stood, motioning for the children to follow. Zoe jumped up immediately, but Mason hesitated, looking between his parents and me. Mason now, Bradley commanded. With a last glance at me, Mason reluctantly joined his family. This isn't over, Bradley warned as they headed for the door. Actually, it is, I replied calmly. The papers have been signed. The trusts are established. The foundation will be announced next month. You now have a choice. Adapt to the new reality or continue fighting it. One path leads to growth, the other to disappointment. Tiffany paused at the doorway, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I thought she might stay, might try to understand. Then Bradley took her elbow, and she allowed herself to be led away. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled slowly, feeling both heartbroken and resolute. That went about as expected, Samuel observed. They'll calm down eventually, Patricia added, when they realize the benefits of the new arrangement. Perhaps, I said, gathering my things. Or perhaps not. Either way, I've done what I should have done years ago. As I left the building, I felt lighter than I had in years, sad for what might have been, but at peace with what now was. 6 months passed quickly. Spring bloomed into summer, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The Eleanor Wilson Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs launched with considerable media attention. We funded our first cohort of 10 women with promising business concepts, providing not just capital but mentorship and networking opportunities. I found myself energized by their determination and creativity, seeing echoes of my younger self in their ambitions. My relationship with Tiffany remained strained. After the meeting, she and Bradley maintained their outrage for several weeks, expecting me to relent under pressure. When that didn't happen, Tiffany attempted reconciliation on her terms, inviting me to dinner where she explained how they could forgive me if I reconsidered my rash decisions. When I declined to change course, communication became minimal. I sent birthday cards to the grandchildren with modest checks, nothing extravagant, but meaningful gifts within normal grandparent parameters. Zoe returned hers unopened. Mason sent a thank you note. The most unexpected development came 3 months after the meeting. My doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon, and I opened it to find Mason standing awkwardly on my porch, a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma? Can I come in?" I welcomed him with surprise and genuine pleasure. Over hot chocolate, his and tea mine, he explained that he'd been thinking about our meeting. "Dad keeps saying you're being selfish and Mom keeps crying about betrayal, but..." He hesitated. "That's not what it felt like to me." "What did it feel like to you?" I asked gently. He considered this seriously. "Like you were treating us like real people who can do things, not just kids who need stuff bought for them." His perception touched me deeply. "That's exactly right, Mason." "I'm sorry about the airport," he said suddenly. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't say anything. "Why are you here today?" I asked. "There's an astronomy summer program at the Science Center. I want to apply, but Dad says it's a waste of time, and Mom says they can't afford the application fee since you've cut them off." The application fee, I discovered, was $75, a sum that should have been easily manageable for them, even with reduced support from me. "Would you like me to pay the application fee?" I asked. He shook his head. "I saved up, but I need an adult to drive me to the interview next week, and they won't do it." "I'd be honored to drive you," I told him. That interview led to Mason's acceptance into the program, which led to weekly visits as I drove him to and from the Science Center. During those drives, we rebuilt our relationship one conversation at a time. He shared his fascination with black holes and nebulae. I told him stories about building my business from nothing. Tiffany was furious when she discovered these visits but couldn't reasonably object to educational opportunities for her son. Gradually, her stance softened from outright hostility to resigned acceptance. For months after the meeting, financial reality had forced changes. Bradley finally took a full-time position at an insurance company. A temporary situation, he assured everyone, though he seemed to be developing some pride in his work. Tiffany, after some dramatic lamenting, accepted a part-time position at a boutique she had previously patronized. Zoe remained distant until her 16th birthday approached. The education trust meant funds were available for college, but not for the elaborate Sweet 16 celebration she'd been planning. After much teenage angst, she agreed to meet me for lunch. "So this education trust," she began without preamble, "it really can only be used for school stuff?" "That's correct," I confirmed. "Tuition, books, housing if you attend college away from home, educational travel opportunities." She stirred her soda with her straw. "And I can't access it until I actually go to college?" "The funds will be available when you need them for legitimate educational purposes. But if you're interested in something educational before college, we could discuss it." That opened the door to conversation about a summer fashion design program she was interested in. Not quite the Sweet 16 party she'd wanted, but something that sparked genuine enthusiasm. By the 6-month mark, a new normal had established itself. Weekly dinners with Mason, occasional lunches with Zoe, monthly, somewhat stiff family dinners with everyone. Tiffany had stopped asking me to change my mind and started asking for career advice instead. Bradley remained coolly civil, but was noticeably more engaged with his family now that he had responsibilities beyond spending my money. The foundation work fulfilled me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each woman we supported had a story of determination that resonated with my own journey. I expanded the initiative to include mentorship programs connecting established businesswomen with newcomers, creating a network of mutual support that I wished had existed when I was starting out. I also began writing the business book I'd long deferred, Building Beauty: How I Created a Cosmetics Empire from My Kitchen Table. The writing process was therapeutic, helping me process both my professional triumphs and personal regrets. My 78th birthday approached with none of the dread I'd felt about previous milestones. Instead, I looked forward to gathering with the small circle of people who truly valued me. Not for what I could give them, but for who I was. The evening before my birthday, Mason called to confirm dinner plans. "Grandma, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you regret it?" "Changing everything, I mean." Even though it made everyone mad, I considered his question carefully.
No, Mason.
"I regret not doing it sooner. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is to believe they're capable of more than they think they are." "I get that," he said thoughtfully. "Oh, and Grandma? Mom wanted me to ask if you need anything for tomorrow." This small gesture from Tiffany, acknowledging my birthday and offering assistance rather than expecting it, represented more progress than grand declarations could have. "Just your company," I replied, smiling. As I ended the call, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The airport abandonment had been painful but necessary, the catalyst for change that had benefited everyone, though not in the ways any of us might have expected. I settled into my favorite chair by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. The path forward wasn't perfect. Relationships built on unhealthy patterns don't transform overnight. But we were moving in the right direction, step by step, towards something authentic and mutually respectful. That night I wrote in my journal, "At 67, I finally learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's fear disguised as generosity. True love believes in the other person's capacity to grow, even when growth is uncomfortable. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is the opportunity to stand on one's own." Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the moment but proved right in the long run? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of finding strength and setting boundaries resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me for more reflections on life's complicated lessons. Remember, it's never too late to change course and stand up for yourself. Sometimes that's exactly what everyone needs.